It is a curious thing how a house may be full of people and yet feel empty, how laughter can ring along polished corridors and still leave, in the wake of it, a faint chill like the draught one senses near a closed window. I felt that chill the moment we arrived at Graysleigh Court. To be perfectly fair, Graysleigh Court did its utmost to appear welcoming. The long sweep of lawn was clipped to a severity that would have pleased my friend Hercule Poirot. The gravel drive was raked into neat, obedient lines, and the house itself sat primly upon a rise, a broad-faced country seat with pillars and balconies and windows that shone as though the glass was smiling. A host of footmen appeared at once, moving with the noiseless efficiency of trained cats. And yet I could not shake the sense that something in the place was waiting. "Mon ami," said Poirot behind me, adjusting his coat with that exactitude which in him was never vanity but rather a statement of principle. "You stare at the house as though it is the gallows?" "I was only thinking it's rather imposing," I replied. Poirot's moustache twitched with restrained amusement. "Imposing, yes, and orderly and expensive and, how you say, too pleased with itself. These houses, they are like certain persons in society. They believe their own good breeding protects them from the unpleasant realities." He said it lightly enough, but I noticed his eyes, those green, giddy attentive eyes, glide over the scene with a quick, silent appraisal. Not a window, not a servant, not a passing guest escaped him. He was, as always, wholly composed and yet wholly alert, like a cat that pretends to nap. We had come at the invitation of Lady Honoria Vane, a widow of considerable charm and greater influence, who had taken it into her head to host a small weekend gathering. A little party, she had called it, though the phrase on her lips meant a dozen carefully curated people, the excellent food, and enough unspoken tension to string a violin. The reason for Poirot's presence, at least the reason given, was that Lady Honoria wished to meet the celebrated detective. She had seen him, she said, at a charity luncheon in town, and had decided at once that he must be exactly the sort of man one wants at Graysleigh. Poirot, who is not immune to admiration when properly expressed, had accepted with a gracious bow. I had suspected that he was amused by her phrasing. Now, as we stepped into the great hall, flagstones gleaming, a chandelier glittering overhead, I saw Lady Honoria herself descend the staircase with a rustle of silk and a smile that was practised, but not unkind. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, how very good of you. You must both be exhausted from London." Poirot took her hand as though it were a relic. "Madame, for such an invitation, one finds always the strength." Lady Honoria laughed, a pleasant sound, with a hint of steel in it. "You flatter. Come. Before everyone arrives for tea, I want you to meet my guests. We are a small party, but—" Her eyes flicked toward me, and I felt, absurdly, as though I were being measured. Rather a fascinating one. That, I later reflected, was precisely the trouble. There was Sir Alistair Grange, Lady Honoria's brother, a tall, stern man with a soldier's posture, and an impatience that sat visibly upon him like ill-fitting clothing. There was Vivian March, a young woman of startling beauty and startling coolness, who spoke as though each word was something she might keep or spend. There was Dr. Theodore Larkin, Lady Honoria's personal physician, a mild, careful fellow with nervous hands and eyes that watched doors. There was Mr. Felix Harrow, a financier, with a genial manner and a laugh that came a fraction too late. And there was, lastly, the man Lady Honoria introduced with a curious blend of pride and caution. "Mr. Julian Darnley," she said, "our guest of honour." Mr. Darnley was perhaps in his late 30s. He had the look of a man who has known both praise and envy and learned to expect each in equal measure. His hair was dark, his suit immaculate, his smile effortless. But what struck me at once, was that he carried his ease like armour. He was too smooth, too prepared. "A pleasure," he said, offering Poirot his hand. Poirot's gaze rested upon him with polite interest. "And for me, monsieur, also. But Lady Honoria speaks of you with, how shall I say, great esteem." Lady Honoria's fingers tightened slightly upon her fan. "Julian has been most helpful to me with certain matters of finance. He has a remarkable mind." Mr. Darnley's smile did not waver. "Merely sensible, Lady Honoria. In my line of work one learns to separate sentiment from arithmetic." Poirot made a tiny sound of approval that might have been agreement, or might, equally, and have been a note placed discreetly upon an invisible ledger. Tea was served in the drawing-room. The talk was bright, and yet beneath it ran the faint current of competitiveness that one often finds in such gatherings, the jostling of status, the subtle barbs, the delicate politics of attention. Lady Honoria played hostess with skill, guiding the conversation as a conductor guides an orchestra, letting one voice rise, quieting another. And Poirot listened. She listened when Sir Alistair spoke sharply of modern speculators. He listened when Vivian March's gaze lingered for the briefest instant upon Mr. Darnley with something like disdain or hunger. He listened when Dr. Larkin mentioned, too casually, that Lady Honoria had suffered a difficult year. He listened when Felix Harrow laughed too easily at Mr. Darnley's mild jokes. At one point, Lady Honoria leaned toward Poirot and said in a low voice, "Ux, you must find Graysleigh terribly dull after London." Poirot's eyes remained upon the room. "On the contrary, madame, in London one sees many faces. Here one sees the same few faces, but perhaps more clearly." Lady Honoria's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned. "You're a dangerous man, Monsieur Poirot." "A dangerous man?" Poirot's tone was light. No, only a man who observes." The first shadow fell at dinner. It was, as you may imagine, an excellent dinner. But Lady Honoria's cook was a genius, and the wines flowed with a generosity that suggested Lady Honoria did not count the cost of impressing people. The candles made everyone's skin look warmer, their smiles softer, their eyes brighter. It was after the second course that I noticed Mr. Darnley, seated opposite me, glance toward the tall double doors of the dining-room as though he expected someone. The movement was quick, almost involuntary. I was about to remark on it, but Sir Alistair began to speak in his brusque manner about a certain land dispute in the county, and conversation shifted. Yet I saw Poirot's gaze slide with casual precision to Mr. Darnley's face. And then later, after dessert, when we rose and drifted toward the drawing-room for coffee, I heard a brief exchange between Mr. Darnley and Lady Honoria. "Not tonight," Lady Honoria murmured, her voice tight. "It cannot wait," Mr. Darnley replied, still smiling, still smooth, but with a pressure beneath it. "You promised me access." Lady Honoria's fingers closed upon the necklace at her throat. "Tomorrow." Mr. Darnley inclined his head. "As you wish." But his eyes, as he turned away, were not at all pleased. The house settled into its nighttime rhythm. Guests retired, doors clicked shut, footsteps faded. Somewhere distant, a clock chimed with leisurely authority. Poirot and I were shown to our rooms in the West Wing. Mine looked out over the gardens, pale rectangles of lawn and hedge silvered by moonlight. Poirot's was opposite, with a small sitting-room attached, which delighted him. He liked a space in which to set his little travel case and arrange his things in tidy ranks as though preparing for a military campaign. "Good night, Hastings," he said, pausing at my door. "Good night," I replied. "Not a bad weekend's work, eh? Good food, comfortable beds, and nothing for you to detect." Poirot's moustache lifted. "Ah, but you see, mon ami, there is always something to detect. The question is only whether the others know it." Before I could ask what he meant, he had turned and walked away, his steps light upon the carpet. I undressed, yawned, and climbed into bed, telling myself I was being foolish. The house was quiet, the world was orderly, there would be a leisurely breakfast, then perhaps a walk. And then, if Lady Honoria insisted, some charming little conversation in which Poirot would shine and I would admire him. That was my thought as sleep took me. It was a scream that woke me, not a single scream, but the sudden, terrible sound of someone shouting for help, echoing down the corridor, rising in pitch, then breaking as though swallowed by the walls. I threw back the covers, heart hammering, and flung open my door. Across the corridor, Poirot's door opened at the same instant. But he emerged fully dressed, save for his coat, astonishingly composed, his eyes bright with the quick focus of a man who has been waiting for precisely this moment. From farther down the hall, Lady Honoria's maid, white-faced, hair tumbling loose, ran toward us, one hand pressed to her mouth. "Monsieur Poirot," she cried. "Captain, it's Mr. Darnley. They've found him. He's—" Poirot moved with sudden speed. "Where?" "The blue room," she sobbed. "The blue room is locked, and he is inside. And there is blood." We ran. The blue room was at the end of the wing, a guest chamber, kept, Lady Honoria had told us, as father liked it, heavy curtains, dark blue wallpaper patterned with pale flowers, a fireplace with an ornate mantel, and a thick Persian rug. But we did not enter it at once, for the door to the blue room was shut. And on the polished brass knob I saw, unmistakably, the small strip of sealing tape. One of Lady Honoria's odd habits are used on certain rooms for security, she had explained with a laugh. It was a pale band set across the crack between door and frame, stamped with her crest. The tape was intact. Sir Alistair arrived, red-faced and furious. Dr. Larkin pushed through, panting. Vivian March stood a few paces back, perfectly still, her expression unreadable. Felix Harrow hovered, wringing his hands. "It's locked," someone said again, as though the words could not be believed unless repeated. Sir Alistair seized the knob and rattled it. The door did not yield. "I have the key," Lady Honoria said, her voice very thin. Her hands were trembling as she fumbled in the pocket of her dressing gown. She produced a key on a ring and held it out. For a moment, no one moved. Poirot took it gently. He examined the seal. Yes, the tape was unbroken. Then he looked at the key. "Madame," he said softly, "are you certain no one has entered this room since it was sealed?" Lady Honoria swallowed. "No one. Julian requested it tonight, but I refused. I sealed it myself after dinner." Poirot nodded once. He inserted the key. The lock turned with a heavy, final sound. Poirot paused, and for an instant the corridor seemed to hold its breath. Then he broke the seal, neatly, with the tip of his fingernail, so that the tape peeled away without tearing. He opened the door. A cold, stale smell poured out. Something metallic, something final. And there, upon the rug, half in the shadow of the bed, lay Julian Darnley, crumpled awkwardly as though he had tried to crawl, one hand stretched toward the door. His throat had been cut, and the room, the sealed room, was empty of any living soul. Poirot did not step inside at once. He stood on the threshold, his face unreadable, his eyes taking in every detail. Then very quietly he said, "Mesdames et messieurs, we have, I think, a problem of the most interesting kind." Poirot lifted a hand and the corridor became a courtroom. "Do not enter," he said quietly. "Not yet. The feet, they talk. If you make them talk too much, they tell only nonsense." Sir Alister's anger burst out. "The man's dead! We can't stand here while the murderer—" "While the murderer is not here," Poirot finished gently. "The door was sealed. The key was with Lady Honoria, and yet Monsieur lies inside. If you rush—" "You destroy the one honest witness, the arrangement of things." Dr. Larkin, pale and shaken, forced his voice steady. "He may still be alive. Let me—" "You will go in when I permit," Poirot said. "First, we observe." Lady Honoria stared at the strip of tape. "It was intact. I swear it." "Yes," said Poirot, "and now cut cleanly, not torn. Madame, you peeled it with care, so the seal was unbroken until this moment." Vivienne March, standing back like a cool statue, said, Then he killed himself." Felix Harrow gave a little choke. "With his throat cut?" Poirot inclined his head. "We test every idea. We do not marry the first one." He stepped into the blue room with that peculiar delicacy of his, placing his feet as though the carpet were thin ice. I followed, trying poorly to imitate him. Sir Alister strode in after us. "Sir Alister," Poirot said without looking up, "outside, if you please." The big man stared. "What nonsense! You are angry." "In anger—" "You make errors. I do not permit errors." After a tense moment, Sir Alister backed out, breathing hard. Dr. Larkin knelt beside Julian Darnley. He took the wrist, lifted an eyelid, then examined the wound with a grimace. "Dead," he said. "Less than an hour, a sharp blade drawn across with force." Poirot's eyes moved. Bed, desk, mantel, curtains, measuring the room. Moonlight leaked through a small crack in the drawn drapes. "Nothing missing?" Poirot asked. Lady Honoria's voice was thin. I don't know. He had only a valise." Poirot's gaze settled on her. "And yet he pressed you for access this evening." Her fingers tightened at her throat. "He wanted to see father's cabinet." "Ah." Poirot's eyes went to the far wall, where an inlaid cabinet stood, half hidden by a folding screen. A brass lock gleamed. He did not touch it. "Locked?" "Always," Lady Honoria said quickly. Poirot nodded once, then turned to me. "Hastings, the windows!" I drew back a curtain and tried the latch. A fastened, firm, no give in the frame. "Locked," I reported. "And the door is locked from without," Poirot murmured. "We have, then, a room that admits a man but does not permit him to leave, unless—" His eyes moved to the fireplace. The hearth was cold, yet on the rug near it lay a faint dusting of soot, disturbed as though something had brushed past. Poirot crouched, tapping along the stone with the tip of his cane. A hollow note answered. "A passage," I whispered. "In old houses, mon ami, and the walls keep secrets." Poirot's voice was soft. "But we confirm before we dream." He straightened and looked to the mantel. A silver tray held matches and an ashtray. In the ashtray lay a single cigarette end, crushed with a fresh curl of ash. "Doctor," Poirot asked, "did Monsieur Darnley smoke?" Larkin blinked. "Yes. A cigarette now and then." Poirot bent and inhaled delicately. "Recent?" Vivienne's lip curled. Sniffing tobacco while a man lies there? Poirot's smile was small. The tobacco tells me he waited. Waiting is a clue. He turned at once to Lady Honoria. You sealed this room? Yes, she said fiercely. After dinner. I checked the lock, I placed the tape, I left. And the key? In my pocket. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Did you go to bed at once? She hesitated. No, Sir Alistair and I spoke in the library. For how long? A quarter of an hour, 20 minutes. Poirot nodded, noting the time. Then you went to your room? Yes.
I did not leave again. Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Larkin. Doctor, you attended Lady Honoria later? Larkin's hands twitched. She sometimes takes a sleeping draught. Mild. She rang, and I brought it. At what time? About 11, Larkin said, avoiding her eyes. Poirot nodded slowly. Then he looked at me. Hastings, before the scream, did you hear footsteps? I searched my memory. No, nothing. Bien. Poirot glanced again at the body. Monsieur Darnley came here alive? He smoked.
While he waited, someone entered, perhaps by that passage, and cut his throat. Then that someone departed, leaving no obvious trace. We must ask, why come to him here? Why in a sealed room? Lady Honoria's breath came in short bursts. It was only papers, father's old papers. Poirot's voice softened. In murder, what matters is not what you believe. It is what another believes. Now, he went to the door and opened it a fraction. Sir Alistair, bring me a lantern and tools to loosen stone. I'd send for the local police. Keep the servants together. And have the dogs shut away if there are any. I want no barking to cover footsteps. Also, ask the butler for the household keys, every key that exists tonight. Sir Alistair's voice came, grudging. You think the killer's still here? Poirot's eyes lifted, bright as a blade. In a house like this, everyone is still here. Lock the doors. No one leaves Graysleigh Court tonight. Sir Alistair returned within minutes. A stable lantern in one hand and a heavy poker in the other, his jaw set with grim determination. Behind him hovered the butler, pale but composed, clutching a leather ring heavy with keys that chimed softly as he moved. The rest of the household had been gathered in the lower hall, the murmur of frightened whispers drifting faintly upward like the hum of distant bees. Poirot accepted the lantern and placed it carefully upon the mantel, but adjusting its position by a fraction of an inch until the light fell evenly across the hearth. Even in that dreadful room, with death lying scarcely 3 feet away, he would not tolerate imbalance. Merci, he said softly. Now we examine. He knelt once more before the fireplace. The stone surround was ornate, but old, and as Poirot tapped along the inner edge with the poker, that hollow note sounded again, distinct, deliberate, undeniable. Sir Alistair exhaled sharply. A priest hole, he muttered. There are dozens in these houses. Not dozens, Poirot corrected mildly, but enough. With careful pressure, he probed at a narrow seam between 2 stones. There was a faint shift, a whisper of grit. Then, with surprising ease, a rectangular panel eased inward 1/2 an inch. Lady Honoria made a small, strangled sound. Poirot did not look at her. Sir Alistair, the lantern. Together they levered the stone aside, and behind it lay darkness, a narrow cavity no more than 2 feet wide, stretching back into the wall. The air that emerged was cold and stale. Poirot leaned forward, holding the lantern high. The passage ran perhaps 6 feet before turning sharply to the left. Mon Dieu, murmured Dr. Larkin. Old service access, Sir Alistair said stiffly. Probably bricked up years ago. Not entirely, Poirot replied. He extended the poker and touched the dust within. It stirred easily. There are marks, I said, bending closer. Look, along the floor. Faint disturbances marred the grey surface, 2 parallel streaks as though something narrow had been dragged or as though a body had brushed the sides in passing. Poirot nodded slowly. Someone has used this recently. Not often, but recently. Vivienne's voice cut across the room, cool and edged. So your murderer came and went like a rat through the walls. Poirot rose gracefully. Rats leave droppings, mademoiselle. Humans leave intentions. He handed the lantern to me. Hastings, remain here. If anyone approaches, you call out, Sir Alistair, with me. Without hesitation, he stepped into the passage. I confess I felt a tightening in my chest as his figure disappeared into the narrow darkness. The lantern's glow shrank, casting long, writhing shadows against the carved stone. After a moment, his voice floated back, calm and steady. There is a door! It opens! Ah! A soft click echoed faintly, and then light spilled into the cavity from another direction. It emerges into the adjoining dressing room, Poirot called. Unused by the look of it, but accessible from the corridor. Sir Alistair's heavy steps followed, then both men reappeared in the blue room through its main door a minute later. There is no sign of forced entry from that side, Sir Alistair said. The dressing-room door was unlocked. Poirot inclined his head, and thus we see the outline of possibility. Or Monsieur Darnley enters the blue room openly before it is sealed, or he enters later by arrangement. He waits. The murderer comes through the hidden passage from the dressing-room, commits the act, and departs the same way. The seal remains untouched. Lady Honoria stared at him aghast. But who would know of that passage? Sir Alistair answered grimly, Family, old staff, anyone who snoops. Poirot's gaze rested lightly upon each face in turn. Or, he added,
someone to whom it was shown. Silence pressed down upon us. Felix Harrow cleared his throat weakly. But why go to such trouble? Why not simply meet him elsewhere? That, said Poirot, is the correct question. He turned suddenly to Dr. Larkin. Doctor, you say the time of death is less than an hour. Yes, perhaps between 11 and midnight. Poirot glanced at Lady Honoria. You received your draft at 11. Yes, she whispered.
And you retired at once? Yes. Alone? A faint flush touched her cheeks. Of course. Poirot's eyes flickered briefly towards Sir Alistair. And you, Sir Alistair, after speaking with your sister? I went to my study. I remained there until I heard the scream. Anyone see you? No. Poirot nodded, as though this pleased him. He turned to Vivienne. Mademoiselle, where were you between 11 and midnight? In my room, she said evenly. Reading. Alone? Yes. And you?
Ah, Monsieur Harrow? In the smoking room, Harrow replied quickly. I had a brandy. The butler saw me. The butler, hovering in the doorway, nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. And the doctor? Larkin swallowed. I returned to my quarters. I wrote a letter. No one saw me. Poirot absorbed this without comment. He then approached the cabinet on the far wall. Lady Honoria, the key. She hesitated only a moment before producing another key from her pocket. The cabinet opened with a quiet click.
Inside lay a neat arrangement of folders, envelopes, and ledgers. Nothing appeared disturbed. Poirot did not touch the contents. Instead, he examined the interior edges, the lock plate, the hinges. No forced entry, he murmured. So if Monsieur sought these papers, he did not take them. Perhaps he came to confront her, Vivienne suggested lightly. Poirot's head tilted. Confrontation implies emotion. The wound implies certainty. He turned back to the body. Julian Darnley's expression, even in death, seemed almost startled. His hand lay outstretched toward the door, fingers curled slightly. Poirot crouched once more. "Notice," he said quietly, "there are no defensive wounds upon the hands." Dr. Larkin bent lower. "You're right." So he did not expect the blow, or he trusted the one who approached. Lady Honoria made a faint, broken sound. Poirot rose and faced us all. "The local police will arrive shortly. They will measure, photograph, and conclude that we have a most inconvenient murder. But before they begin to tread over everything, I ask one thing." His gaze sharpened. "No one is to discuss the hidden passage outside this room. Not yet." Sir Alistair frowned. "Why conceal it?" "Because," Poirot replied softly, "the guilty person does not yet know what we have discovered, and sometimes ignorance is the most revealing companion." The faint wail of an approaching motor car echoed through the night air beyond the windows. Poirot folded his hands behind his back. "Now," he said quietly, "we shall see who grows most uneasy when the questions truly begin." The motor car's lights swept the lawns, and the crunch of gravel announced authority at last. Sir Alistair went down with the stiff relief of a man who trusts uniforms. Poirot remained outside the blue room, hands folded, as though the house itself might confess if he listened long enough. Two men came up, the village constable, breathless, and Inspector James Pritchard of the county, broad-shouldered, moustached, and plainly unimpressed by Graysleigh Court. He took in the night-clothes, the frightened faces, and then his eyes fixed on Poirot. "Monsieur Hercule Poirot?" Poirot bowed. "At your service, Inspector." Pritchard's gaze slid to the strip of sealing tape now resting neatly on the mantel. "Sealed room, I'm told." "Sealed door," Poirot corrected. "Rooms are less obedient." Sir Alistair snapped, "There's a corpse inside." Pritchard stepped over the threshold and stopped short as the lantern revealed Julian Darnley on the rug. He knelt, examined without disturbing much, then rose. "Time of death?" "Between 11 and midnight," Dr. Larkin said. "Nearer midnight, I think." Pritchard nodded, and the constable scribbled. "Lady Honoria, you sealed this door yourself?" "Yes," she whispered. "After dinner." "And you kept the key?" "Yes." Pritchard walked to the windows, tried them. He then turned to the fireplace, sniffed the cold ash, and straightened. "And what do you make of it, Monsieur Poirot?" "That someone wishes you to believe the impossible," Poirot said mildly. "That is always suspicious." Sir Alistair blurted, "There's a passage behind the hearth, leads to the dressing-room next door." Poirot's eyes flashed for a fraction, but his tone stayed smooth. "Ah, you are quick, Sir Alistair." Pritchard's mouth tightened with satisfaction. "Then your mystery's finished. A man gets in, another gets out, and the gentry call it magic. We'll have that passage measured. Constable, fetch the photographer." Poirot's voice was soft. "Finished already, Inspector?" "I prefer facts," Pritchard said. "Now, who can use that passage?" Sir Alistair answered at once. "Old staff, servants, anyone who's nosed about." Pritchard's eyes went to the butler at the door. "Names?" "Only Mrs. Phelps, the housekeeper, has been here long," the butler said, "and Mr. Simmons, the gardener. The rest are recent." "Bring them," Pritchard ordered. Mrs. Phelps arrived with a pinched mouth and steady eyes. Simmons followed, cap in hand, smelling faintly of damp earth. Both stared at Darnley with a shock that looked genuine enough to me. Pritchard questioned them about the passage. Mrs. Phelps admitted she knew of it. So did Simmons, who had helped repair the hearthstones years ago. Neither, they insisted, had used it tonight. And where were you between 11 and midnight?" Pritchard demanded. "In my room," Mrs. Phelps replied. "Asleep." "In the potting shed," Simmons said, shifting, "mending a latch." "At midnight?" "I don't watch the clock so close, sir." Pritchard's eyes sharpened. "Convenient." Mrs. Phelps drew herself up. "Inspector, Mr. Simmons is a decent man." "A decent man with access," Pritchard snapped. His gaze snagged on the ashtray. "And a cigarette end."
"Who smokes that brand?" "Darnley did," Felix Harrow said too quickly. "Perhaps," said Pritchard. "Or perhaps the man who waited here did." He swung back to Simmons. "You ever borrow from the house? Money? Silver?" Simmons reddened. "No, sir." "Any reason to hate Mr. Darnley?" "Hate him? I barely spoke to him." Pritchard looked to Lady Honoria. "Anything missing?" "Nothing that I know," she said, but her voice trembled as though the words cost her. Pritchard made a decision. We searched the servant quarters and the outbuildings at first light. Constable, keep an eye on the gardener until then." Simmons's eyes widened. "You can't. I didn't—" Sir Alistair cut him off. "If you're innocent, you've nothing to fear." Poirot watched, saying nothing. I saw his gaze drop to the gardener's hands, rough, strong, with a fresh nick along the thumb. Then to Mrs. Phelps's face, where indignation fought worry. Then to Vivian March in the doorway, expression languid.
Yet fingers unnaturally still against her sleeve. Pritchard addressed the rest of us. "No one leaves the house. I'll take statements in the morning. For now, return to your rooms and lock your doors. If you hear anything, ring at once." The group began to disperse. Poirot stepped closer to Pritchard, speaking low. "Inspector, a warning. When you find a path, do not assume it is the road." Pritchard's eyes narrowed. Meaning?" "A clever murderer is delighted when we all hurry the same way," Poirot murmured. Pritchard grunted. "I'll take my chances with evidence." "And I," said Poirot, "with human nature." When the inspector turned away, Poirot glanced at me. In that look was the faintest impatience, not at Pritchard, but at the world's eagerness to seize the first explanation. "Come, Hastings," he said quietly. "Before this house pretends to sleep, on we ask one small question. Who tonight desired that cabinet to open, and who feared it most?" We went back into the blue room again briefly while the constable went downstairs. Poirot stood by the cabinet without touching it, and nodded toward the key ring the butler had brought. "See, Hastings? Many keys, but only one for this lock. Yet the lock shows no impatience, no scratches, no hurried turning. Whoever wanted these papers did not struggle. He was admitted,
Or he possessed knowledge. He bent, and with the corner of his handkerchief lifted the cigarette end. "This is not Darnley's brand. I saw his case at dinner." Poirot's remark struck me oddly. In the turmoil, I had not thought of cigarette brands as fingerprints, yet to him they were as eloquent as handwriting. He surveyed the room again as though it were a stage set awaiting the return of its actors. "At dinner," he said, "Monsieur Darnley smoked a slim cigarette, very white paper."
"I tipped with gold. This is thicker, the paper is brown. Someone else waited here." "You mean the murderer?" I whispered. "Or the one who arranged the meeting," Poirot replied. "In this house people arrange many things. Some can become murders." A soft creak sounded in the corridor. The butler stood at the door, key-ring in hand, his face dutifully blank. Monsieur Poirot, he murmured, or Lady Honoria requests you in the morning. The morning is when people pretend to be calm, Poirot said, pleasantly. I will see her. The butler hesitated. There is something else. Inspector Pritchard told me to return the keys to the pantry, but one key is missing. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Which key? The small brass key for the linen cupboard in the east corridor. It is always on this ring. Poirot took the ring, checked it once, then handed it back. Merci.
Do not mention it to the inspector yet. First, I wish to see that linen cupboard. We left the blue room. The corridor seemed longer now, the carpets darker, as if the house resented being disturbed. The butler led us by lantern to a plain door between two guest rooms. A brass plate, red linen. He tried the knob. Locked. And the missing key would open it, Poirot said. Yes, sir. Poirot crouched to the keyhole. No scratches. It has not been forced. So someone took the key earlier.
With leisure, either to use it or to make us think it was used. You suspect this cupboard connects to the passage? I asked. In old houses, the linen cupboards, the pantries, the servants' stairs, they are the veins, Poirot replied. If you wish to move unseen, you move through the veins. He turned to the butler. Who fetched linen tonight? Martha, sir, the maid who screamed. She took extra sheets to Lady Honoria after the doctor brought the draught.
Around 11. Poirot's moustache twitched. And Martha, does she smoke? Smoke? No, sir. And Mr. Simmons? A pipe, sir, not cigarettes. Mrs. Phelps? No, sir. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Then we find the one who smokes these cigarettes. A faint rustle came behind us. At the corridor junction stood Vivian March, wrapped in a silk robe, hair loose, her pallor made sharper by the lamplight. You're prowling, she said. Is there another corpse? Not yet, mademoiselle, Poirot replied.
I hope to keep it so. Her gaze went to the linen cupboard. What are you hunting? A secret tunnel behind the towels? Perhaps, Poirot said. Or perhaps only a missing key. Vivienne's mouth tightened. Keys go missing in houses like this. Servants misplace them. Men pocket them. And ladies? Poirot asked softly. Her eyes flashed. Ladies do not steal cupboard keys. Unless they wish to enter quietly without being observed, Poirot returned. Are you accusing me? No. Oh, I observe you are awake, dressed, and wandering when most people attempt to sleep. She lifted her chin. I don't sleep well. Besides, you aren't sleeping. Poirot smiled. Touché? Vivienne looked past us toward the west wing. The inspector thinks it was the gardener. And you? I think it will be whoever is easiest to blame, she said. That is usually the truth people prefer. Poirot studied her. You have known Mr. Darnley longer than tonight. I met him in London, she said quickly. Everyone has met him. And did you like him? I admired him, she replied, as though the word annoyed her. He was clever. He liked to collect people's weaknesses. Poirot nodded. Then he and this house are similar. Her eyes hardened. If you want scandal, ask Lady Honoria. She invited him. She sealed the room. Yes, Poirot said gently. She sealed the room, but perhaps she sealed more than a door. Vivienne stared, then turned away. Good night, Monsieur Poirot. When she had gone, the butler exhaled. Poirot asked the butler, still in that courteous tone, to place a chair at the head of the main staircase and sit there until dawn, with a bell rope within reach. Not to play the hero, Poirot warned, but to notice. Tonight the smallest sound is a confession. The butler nodded, swallowing, and went off with a briskness that did not quite hide his fear. As we turned back, Poirot paused beside a high window and listened. Somewhere below, a door clicked, soft, controlled. Then the hush returned. Poirot's eyes met mine. "You hear? Someone moves, Hastings. The missing key is not only for linen, it is for permission. When people seek permission at night, it is rarely for an errand." Poirot leaned toward me. "Tomorrow we speak with Martha, with Lady Honoria, with the doctor. We discover who had reason to take that key, and we discover why Mr. Darnley demanded access." "And tonight?" I asked. Poirot's eyes lifted to the dark ceiling. "Tonight, we watch. The murderer believes he has built a perfect sealed room, but he has forgotten one thing." "What?" Poirot smiled faintly. "A sealed room is only perfect if it remains sealed. Now it is open, and fear will begin to walk about these corridors." Dawn came grudgingly to Graysleigh Court. A thin grey light seeped through the curtains. I found Poirot already awake, seated at his travelling desk with the contents of his valise arranged in strict lines, and he was immaculate. Only his eyes betrayed that he had slept little. "Good," he said as I entered. "You have the face of a man who heard doors in the night." "I heard one," I admitted. Poirot nodded. "And our butler, stationed as a sentinel, heard footsteps on the east corridor at 2 o'clock. He rang no bell because he heard also a soft voice, Lady Honoria's, saying, 'It is nothing, go back.'" "That seems important," I said. "It is important that she wished it to be nothing," Poirot replied. "Come, before the inspector hammers his nails into one theory, we place a few pebbles in his path." Inspector Pritchard had established himself in the breakfast room. A tray of untouched eggs and kippers sat cooling beside his notebook. Mrs. Phelps hovered near the sideboard while constables moved through the hall. Sir Alistair stood by the window watching the drive. Pritchard looked up sharply. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot, ready to give me your clever solution?" Poirot smiled. "Not yet. But I have for you 2 small facts. The cigarette end in the blue room was not Monsieur Darnley's brand, and one key was missing from the household ring, the linen cupboard key." Pritchard snorted. "Keys go missing, and cigarette ends. Half the county smokes." "Just so," Poirot said. "Therefore we must ask, who smokes brown paper cigarettes, and who needed that cupboard at night?" Pritchard made a note. "Bring the maid, Martha." Martha arrived with red-rimmed eyes, twisting her apron. She described waking early, going to fetch towels, finding the blue room door shut and sealed, then hearing, she could not say how, a thud from inside. When she fetched Mrs. Phelps, the scream had come out of her without permission. Poirot asked softly, "At 11 you carried sheets to Lady Honoria?" "Yes, sir. Extra linen. The doctor's draft makes her sweat sometimes." "And you took the linen cupboard key from the ring?" Martha stared. "No, sir. Mrs. Phelps keeps the ring. The butler fetches keys for us." "Then who fetched it for you?" Poirot asked. "The butler did, sir. He opened it. I took the sheets. He locked it again." Poirot's eyes flicked to the butler, rigid by the door. "At what time?" "A little after 11, sir." "And later in the night, did you see anyone on the east corridor?" "No, sir." Pritchard waved her away. "Bring Lady Honoria." Lady Honoria entered as though she had pinned composure to her gown, yet the clasp did not hold. Her hands trembled faintly. Poirot bowed, and Pritchard's voice hardened. "Lady Honoria, you told me you went to bed after receiving your draft, yet my man heard you on the east corridor at 2. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "The butler said that?" "He told Monsieur Poirot," Pritchard said. "Answer." Lady Honoria's chin lifted. Yes, I went out. Why? I could not sleep. I wished for water. At 2 o'clock, Sir Alistair burst out. Honoria, be quiet, she snapped. Then, more softly, I was upset. Poirot's voice was gentle. Madame, did you go to the linen cupboard? A flicker crossed her face. No. And did you speak to someone? She hesitated. I spoke to Dr. Larkin. The doctor, summoned at once, looked wretched. He admitted Lady Honoria had come to his room around 2, distressed, asking for something stronger to sleep. He had refused. The earlier draught was enough. Poirot's eyes held him. And then? She went back to her room, Larkin said quickly.
I heard her door close. Did you see anyone else? No? Poirot nodded. Inspector, may we now look at the linen cupboard? Pritchard agreed with ill grace, and we proceeded to the east corridor. A locksmith was fetched. The lock yielded with a click, and the door swung open on the smell of lavender and starch. Shelves of folded sheets rose like pale cliffs. But Poirot did not look at the linen. He looked at the floor. In the dust near the back wall lay a faint trace, 2 smudged crescents.
X like shoe edges turned in. Poirot lifted a hanging stack of tablecloths and revealed a narrow door panel, nearly invisible, set flush into the wood. Sir Alistair swore. Poirot's eyes shone. A second way into the veins, he pressed. The panel opened inward, revealing a tight servant stair dropping into darkness. Pritchard's moustache bristled. So our murderer used this, the gardener, the housekeeper, any servant. Poirot held up a finger. Perhaps. But first we ask, who knew this stair existed?
Kiss, and who took the key that makes it convenient? Below, from the darkness, came a faint metallic clink, as though something had shifted on a step. Poirot straightened instantly. Pritchard barked, Constable, down there, now! And as the constable began to descend, a soft rustle rose from the stairwell, followed by hurried, retreating footfalls into the depths of the house. Poirot caught Pritchard's sleeve. Not alone, he murmured.
A corner is where a frightened man becomes dangerous. But the inspector was already striding forward, lantern raised, pride pricked. From below came a faint slam, then silence, thicker than before. Poirot looked up at the dusty crescents on the floor, as if they were handwriting. You see, Hastings, he whispered, someone is still moving, quietly. Inspector Pritchard did not wait for reinforcements. He plunged down the servant stair with the constable at his heels, lantern bobbing, boots thudding. Poirot followed, and I after him, the narrow walls pressing close, smelling of damp plaster and old soap. The stair twisted sharply, and the sound of our descent seemed to travel ahead of us, warning whatever hid below. At the bottom, the passage opened into a low corridor lined with storage doors, coal, preserves, broken furniture swathed in sheets. The air was colder here. Pritchard held up a hand and listened. From somewhere deeper came a faint drip, steady as a metronome. "Way there!" the constable hissed, pointing. A door at the far end stood ajar. Pritchard strode forward, shoved it wide, and swung the lantern in. The room was a small wine cellar. On the floor lay a scattered handful of corks, and beside them a brown paper cigarette case snapped open like a shell. No man stood there, yet the smell of fresh smoke lingered, and the dust near the threshold showed a single clear print, narrow, with a sharp heel. Pritchard swore.
Ah, he's doubled back. Poirot's voice was calm. Or he never came this way at all. Inspector, look! Between 2 racks, a hanging canvas concealed another door. The edge of the canvas trembled slightly as though touched by a recent hand. Pritchard yanked the canvas aside. The door beyond was shut. He tried the handle. Locked. Poirot bent, studying the keyhole. "Not locked with this house's key," he murmured. "A different lock entirely." Sir Alistair's voice echoed from the stair above.
"Aye, what's going on?" Pritchard snapped. "Someone's using your rabbit runs." The constable produced a small set of picks, hands trembling, and worked at the lock while Pritchard fumed. Poirot, meanwhile, lifted the cigarette case with his handkerchief. Inside were 3 cigarettes of thick brown paper and a small silver lighter engraved with a simple J.D. "A souvenir," I said. "A message," Poirot corrected softly. "But not from the murdered man, armed from the one who wishes us to believe he was here." The lock clicked. The door swung open on a blacker darkness that smelled faintly of river mud. Beyond, a narrow tunnel ran straight for several yards, then rose by a short flight of steps to a wooden hatch. A thread of daylight seeped around its edges. Pritchard climbed first and shoved. The hatch opened with a groan into the gardener's tool shed. Rakes and spades hung neatly. The shed door, however, was ajar, and outside we heard hurried feet on gravel. Pritchard burst out into a fine drizzle. Across the yard a figure ran, slight, quick, coat flapping, then vanished into the kitchen gardens. Poirot did not run. He watched, then lowered his gaze to the ground near the shed and picked something up, an empty glass ampule, its label peeled away, a trace of clear liquid still clinging. "Drug?" I asked. "Medicine," Poirot said.
Now we know why Dr. Larkin was visited at 2 o'clock. We found Pritchard in the gardens, his arm clamped round his quarry's wrist. It was Martha the maid, hair pinned hastily, eyes wild. In her hand she clutched the missing linen cupboard key. "I didn't do it," she sobbed. He told me." "Who told you?" Pritchard barked. Martha's gaze flicked to Dr. Larkin, who had arrived breathless from the house. For a second the doctor's face went blank with fear. Poirot stepped forward.
"Gentle as ever." "Martha, you took the key last night." "Why?" She swallowed. "Doctor said Lady Honoria was in danger. He said someone would steal papers from the cabinet. He told me to watch the corridor, and if I heard anyone, to hide in the linen stair and ring the bell cord there. He gave me this key." Pritchard turned to Larkin. "Is that true?" Larkin's lips parted, no sound coming. His eyes darted to Lady Honoria, standing by the path, pale as chalk. Poirot held up the ampule. "And this?"
"Aye, doctor." "What was it? A sedative? Something to make a witness sleep or to steady your own nerves?" Larkin shook his head violently. "You don't understand. Darnley was blackmailing her. He had letters. He threatened ruin. I only tried to protect her." "By sending a frightened girl into secret passages?" Poirot asked. Martha began to cry in earnest. "I never went into the blue room. I was in the stair like he said. I heard someone pass, quick, and later I heard a man's whisper. And the door in the cellar," Poirot interrupted softly. "The whisper, what did he say?" She wiped her face with her sleeve. "He said, 'It is done, keep still.' And then I smelled smoke." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A man's whisper, not the doctor's, and smoke of brown paper." He turned, and his gaze settled not on Larkin, but on Felix Harrow, who had drifted to the back of the little crowd, smiling too brightly for the rain. Harrow's hand went unconsciously to his pocket. Poirot said gently,
Monsieur Harrow, may I see your cigarette case?" Harrow's smile faltered. "Really, Poirot, this is absurd." Yet he produced a sleek case of white paper cigarettes too quickly, as though offering proof before it was demanded. Poirot did not take it. He merely watched the pocket Harrow had not emptied, and the tiny bulge there, sharp-cornered, like a second case concealed. Rain pattered, counting seconds between breaths. Poirot's request hung in the damp air, like a thread, pulled taut. A Felix Harrow's geniality, so reliable at dinner, seemed suddenly a painted mask with the edges lifting. His gaze darted toward Pritchard's constables, toward the shed door, toward the house itself, as though searching for an exit that no longer existed. "Monsieur Poirot," he said with a laugh that did not quite land, "I assure you, I don't—" Poirot raised a hand, not accusing, merely patient. "You gave me the case you wished me to see. I ask for the one you do not." Pritchard stepped in, eyes suspicion sharpening him. "Turn out your pockets, Harrow." Harrow's smile tightened. "Inspector, this is outrageous. I'm a guest." "And I'm a policeman," Pritchard snapped. "Now." For a heartbeat, Harrow hesitated, just long enough for everyone to see his hesitation. Then he shoved his hand into the pocket Poirot had watched and withdrew a second cigarette case. Brown leather, scuffed at the corners, not at all the polished accessory of a financier. He held it as though it burned. Poirot's eyes were gentle. "Ah, the brown paper!" Harrow's cheeks mottled. They're cheaper. A habit from before I made my money. I didn't think it mattered." "It matters when it matches the ashtray in the sealed room," Pritchard said. "Light one." Harrow's mouth opened, then shut. His hand trembled as he fumbled for a match. He struck it, cupped it from the drizzle, and lit a cigarette. The smoke that rose had that same heavier scent I had noticed in the cellar. Poirot sniffed once, eyed delicately. "Yes," Pritchard's voice went hard. "So you were in that room?" Harrow flared. "No, I didn't kill Darnley." "Perhaps not," Poirot said quietly. "But you waited." Harrow's eyes went to Lady Honoria, then away. I went there earlier, before it was sealed." Lady Honoria's breath caught. "You went into Father's blue room?" Harrow swallowed. "Julian asked me to. He said he needed a witness. He said you might accuse him of stealing papers. He wanted someone to see he took nothing." Poirot's head tilted. "And you agreed?" Harrow's laugh was thin. "I didn't have a choice. He had me, Poirot. He had my transactions, the ones I hid. He said he'd ruin me." Pritchard seized the opening. "Blackmail. Good motive." Harrow shook his head violently. "No, listen, I went in around 10:30. Darnley wasn't there yet. I waited a while. Smoked, yes. Then I heard footsteps in the corridor and panicked, or I left through the passage to the dressing room. I didn't want anyone seeing me sneaking about Lady Honoria's private wing." His eyes flicked to Sir Alistair. "I swear I left before she sealed the door." Poirot nodded slowly. "You were the first shadow, Monsieur Harrow, not the last." Pritchard turned on Dr. Larkin. "And you, Doctor, sent the maid into the stairs. Why?" Larkin's shoulders sagged. "Because Darnley told Lady Honoria he would come for the cabinet papers tonight. He said he'd take what he deserved. She was terrified. She came to me after dinner. She begged me to help." His voice cracked. "I thought if someone tried to enter secretly, Martha could see. I gave her the key." Poirot watched Lady Honoria. "And did you tell the doctor about the linen stair?" Lady Honoria's eyes glistened. I didn't know there was one." Sir Alistair barked. "Nonsense! You grew up here." "I knew of the fireplace passage as a child," she said sharply. Not this." Poirot's gaze moved, thoughtful. "Then who knew both routes, the hearth passage and the linen stair?" Mrs. Phelps spoke suddenly, her voice clipped. "The old steward did. He showed it to Sir Alistair when they were boys." Sir Alistair's face reddened. "That's ancient history." "And Mr. Simmons found the hatch in the shed," Mrs. Phelps added. "He told me last year." Simmons, standing under a dripping apple tree with a constable nearby, stared at her as if betrayed. I only said it was there, ma'am." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "So knowledge circulates. It is like gossip. Once released, it finds its way to those who will use it." Pritchard waved a constable forward. "Fetch Simmons and the housekeeper. We'll take them in. Someone's been running through those passages." Poirot's voice cut softly across him. "Inspector, the running girl had the key. The man in the cellar left a cigarette case and an ampule, as if he wished to be chased. Do you not see? Someone is staging." Pritchard glared. "Staging or not, someone's dead." "Yes," Poirot said. "And the dead man wanted a witness. Why? He feared accusation of theft, or he planned to accuse." Lady Honoria's hand flew to her mouth. "He said he wanted access. He said it couldn't wait." Poirot's eyes held hers. "What exactly did he want, madame?" Her throat worked. "My father's papers. There are letters. About the war, about money, about a trust." Poirot's voice was gentle, but relentless.
"Oh, and about Julian Darnley?" Lady Honoria's eyes fluttered closed. "About his father." Silence fell heavier than the rain. Sir Alistair's head snapped toward her. "What did you say?" Lady Honoria's voice was a whisper now, stripped of hostess polish. "Julian was not who he claimed. He knew it. Father knew it. Julian found out there was something owed. He said he would take it, or destroy me." Poirot nodded slowly, as though a puzzle piece had clicked into place. "Oh, then the cabinet is not merely paper. It is identity and money and disgrace." Pritchard's impatience returned. "We'll open it and see." Lady Honoria flinched. "No!" Poirot raised a hand. "Not here. Not now, Inspector. You open it in anger. You scatter the order. We must open it with care, like a letter one fears to read." Pritchard grunted, but he saw the truth of it. "Fine, back inside, statements in the library, and keep that maid watched." As we walked toward the house,
Old Poirot fell into step beside me. "Hastings," he murmured, "our murderer is close. He leaves props, cigarette cases, ampules, missing keys. He wants Pritchard to grab a servant. Meanwhile, he watches." Poirot's eyes flicked to a window above, the west wing. A curtain moved just a fraction, then stilled. "And he is not afraid of being seen." We assembled in the library, where rain tapped at the tall windows and the smell of leather seemed to press upon our nerves. Inspector Pritchard set his notebook on the writing table as though planting a flag. Lady Honoria sat rigidly on the settee, hands clasped. Sir Alistair stood behind her like a guard. Vivian March occupied an armchair with an air of cool detachment. Her gaze kept sliding to the cabinet key in Lady Honoria's hand. Felix Harrow lingered by the hearth, an unlit cigarette between his fingers. Dr. Larkin remained apart, shoulders slumped. Pritchard began briskly. Each of you states where you were between 11 and midnight, and what you know of Darnley's business here. Then we open the cabinet." Poirot adjusted a book on the mantel a fraction, satisfied himself, and sat, hands folded, watching. Sir Alistair repeated his alibi with offended precision. Vivian said she had read in her room. Harrow restated his confession. He had waited in the blue room earlier, smoked, left through the hearth passage, and returned to the smoking room where the butler could attest. Larkin explained the key, the maid, the supposed threat. "And you, Lady Honoria?" Pritchard demanded. "You sealed the door and held the key. What were you doing at midnight?"
"In bed," she said. "Alone?" Sir Alister's jaw tightened. "Inspector," Poirot's voice came softly. "Madame, did Mr. Darnley come to you after dinner?" She hesitated, then nodded. "He came to the library." "He demanded the papers." "And you refused," Poirot murmured. "I told him tomorrow." Vivienne's voice cut in, silk over steel. "He never accepted tomorrow?" Poirot's eyes lifted to her. "You knew him before tonight?" "I met him in London," she said. "He collected secrets." Pritchard rapped his pencil. "The cabinet!" Lady Honoria's hand trembled as she produced the key. For a moment she held it as though it were a knife. Poirot rose, not to take it, but to stand near, support without touch.
"Ah, madame," he murmured, "we open with care." She crossed to the inlaid cabinet and unlocked it. Inside were folders tied with ribbon, a ledger, and a small tin box. Pritchard reached, but Poirot stopped him with an outstretched handkerchief. "Inspector," Poirot said mildly, "no fingerprints for free." Pritchard grudgingly waited as Poirot lifted the tin box and set it on the table. Lady Honoria's eyes fixed on it with dread. Poirot opened it. Inside lay a bundle of letters, yellowed but neatly stacked, and beneath them a thin document stamped with a faded crest. "Read," Pritchard ordered. Lady Honoria's lips moved soundlessly. Then she said very quietly, "It is a trust. My father created it. For a child." "What child?" Sir Alister snapped. Her voice broke. For Julian Ashcroft. Father believed him to be his grandson." Harrow let out a strangled laugh. "So that's it. The inheritance." Vivienne's eyes glittered. "It came for what he thought was his." "And threatened you," Poirot murmured. Lady Honoria nodded, tears spilling. "He said he would expose everything, my father's scandal, my silence. He said he would ruin the family name." Sir Alister's face went grey. "You should have told me." "Would you have listened?" she whispered. Pritchard leaned over the letters. "This gives motive to anyone who benefits if Darnley never claims. You, Lady Honoria. You, Sir Alister. Even the doctor." "It is enough to charge." Poirot lifted a hand. "A motive is a shadow. It does not tell you where the body walked." He held one letter to the light. "See, Hastings, the ink is old, but this corner is freshly handled. Someone has read these recently." "Darnley," Pritchard said. "Perhaps," Poirot replied. "But the cabinet shows no hurried search. Someone knew exactly what to read, what to leave." Poirot's eyes moved to Dr. Larkin. "Doctor, you keep medicines. You have ampules. Who else has access to your dispensary?" Larkin swallowed. "Only me?" Poirot nodded. "Then either you lie or you were persuaded." Sir Alister's temper flared. "You are accusing him again." Poirot turned calmly. "No, I accuse the person who whispers, 'It is done,' in a hidden stare, who plants cigarette cases, who chooses a sealed room because it flatters the imagination. Such a person enjoys control." Vivienne murmured, almost to herself. "Darnley enjoyed control." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Yes, and who enjoyed controlling Darnley?" Silence followed, uneasy, as though each of us felt the hook. At that moment, from the corridor outside, came a short, sharp cry, then running feet and a heavy thud, as if someone had fallen. Poirot was on his feet instantly. "Ah," he said softly, "now the house provides the next move." We hurried into the corridor. At the foot of the gallery steps, Martha lay half sitting against the wall, eyes wide, one hand pressed to her mouth.
Beside her,
The butler knelt, trying to rouse a man sprawled face down on the runner. When the man rolled, we saw Mr. Simmons's muddy cheek and the corded muscles of his neck. He was unconscious, not dead. A length of thin wire, like a garrote or a snare, had slipped from his fist. Pritchard snatched it up, triumphant. "There's your gardener," he said. Poirot, however, was already looking past Simmons to the open door of the nearby morning room. On the threshold, a single brown paper cigarette burned quietly in an ashtray, as if someone had just stepped away for only a moment. Poirot crossed the threshold of the morning room as though he expected the air itself to be guilty. The brown paper cigarette in the ashtray burned down with patient purpose, the end glowing like a tiny eye. No one sat in the chairs, the curtains were half drawn, the rain light made the polished table look cold. Inspector Pritchard, still gripping the wire taken from Simmons's fist, strode after him. "That settles it," he said. "The gardener tried to strangle someone, perhaps the maid, and got caught. Same man used the passages, same man killed Darnley. I'll have him in irons." Poirot did not answer at once. He leaned over the ashtray, inhaled delicately, and then, with a quick glance, touched the cigarette end with his handkerchief. "Fresh," he murmured. "Not more than a minute." Martha's voice shook behind us.
I saw a shadow. Then Mr. Simmons came stumbling, and he fell." Sir Alistair snapped. "He was running to finish what he started." "Or he was running from someone," Poirot said softly. Pritchard scoffed. "From whom? Your phantom with the clever cigarettes?" Poirot's eyes lifted to the door frame. A faint smear marked the varnish, as if a damp sleeve had brushed it. He followed the smear with his gaze to the corridor carpet, where two wet prints, narrow,
Sharply heeled, headed away toward the servants' wing. Poirot straightened. "Inspector," he said, "a wire proves only that a man held a wire. It does not prove whom he meant to use it upon." They roused Simmons with smelling salts. His eyes fluttered open, then fixed on Poirot with the terror of a trapped animal. He tried to sit up, failed, and began to babble. "I didn't mean, he said I had to. He said if I didn't, he'd hang me." Pritchard seized him. "Who?" Simmons's gaze darted to Mrs. Phelps, and then away. A gentleman, smelled of sharp soap, talked soft, like he was always smiling. Poirot crouched. "And last night? Did you kill Mr. Darnley?" "No!" Simmons cried. "I was in the shed. Then I heard steps under the floor. He came up through the hatch, gave me money, said, 'Keep quiet.' Today he came again, said I must take the wire and scare the maid, make it look like I'm the one. I didn't want to. Then something hit me from behind." Pritchard stared.
"I hit you?" Simmons fumbled at his scalp. There was a swelling. Poirot rose and turned his head slightly, listening. "So?" he murmured. "Our director is still in the house, still arranging scenes." Lady Honoria's voice broke. "Who would do this?" Poirot's gaze slid across the faces and paused a fraction too long on Felix Harrow, whose hands were in his pockets as though to keep them from trembling. "Inspector," Poirot said, "give me 10 minutes. If after 10 minutes you wish to arrest Mr.
Simmons, you will do it. But first, allow me to test one point." Pritchard's jaw worked. 10. Poirot moved down the corridor and stopped at a side table, where a silver tray held soap and a decanter. He lifted the soap, sniffed, and replaced it precisely. "Sharp soap," he murmured. "The house uses it. So the smell is not enough." He rapped on Dr. Larkin's door. When the doctor opened, face drawn, Poirot slipped inside without waiting. I heard drawers open, glass clink. Our Poirot emerged, holding a small bottle. "Chloroform," he said quietly. "And your ampules. One is missing." Larkin went white. Only you," Poirot agreed. "Unless you were distracted. Doctor, when Lady Honoria came at 2, you were busy. Your door was not locked." Larkin's lips parted. "No." Poirot's eyes rested on the doctor's ink-stained fingers. "You wrote letters?" he said. "To whom?" Larkin stammered that it was personal, then flushed. And in that flush, Poirot seemed to read an entire confession that was not quite crime. "Very well," Poirot murmured. "But understand this. Someone entered your room without fear. That someone knew you would not cry out. Either you are loved or you are threatened." He turned to the corridor and listened again. From the lower floor came the soft closing of a door. Careful, unhurried. Poirot's mouth tightened. "He walks like an owner," he whispered, "and now he expects us to argue while he chooses his move." We returned to the library where Pritchard waited. Poirot held up the bottle. "Inspector, your culprit wishes to sleep people, not to fight them." Mr. Simmons was struck and perhaps dazed with this. The maid was meant to be frightened. The cigarette was meant to tell us, "Look, the smoker was here." Pritchard's eyes narrowed. "And who is the smoker?" Poirot's gaze went to Felix Harrow. "The one who admitted he waited in the blue room and left by the passage. The one compromised by blackmail. The one who would gladly see Darnley dead and gladly see the blame fall on a servant." Harrow's voice cracked. "No." Poirot lifted a hand. "Not yet. I have not said you killed him. I say you are being used. The murderer is closer, calmer, and has no need to hide his smoking. He smokes to be seen." Vivienne's cool voice floated from her chair. "Then who? Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot smiled faintly, and for the first time that morning I felt the chill of certainty. "Mademoiselle," he said, "we shall find out at dinner when I invite everyone to be seated, and I remove, one by one, the lies." The rain had stopped by evening, but Graysleigh Court did not feel cleansed. The air inside the dining room was close, charged not with candlelight elegance as it had been the night before, but with expectation. Every chair was occupied. Inspector Pritchard stood near the sideboard, arms folded. The servants had been dismissed. Even the butler waited outside the doors. Poirot had arranged the table with curious care. The cabinet papers lay stacked at one end. The brown paper cigarette case rested at the other. Between them, like a bridge, lay the thin wire taken from Simmons's hand. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began softly, "last night we admired a sealed room. This morning we discovered secret passages, missing keys, or were planted evidence, and a gardener struck from behind. It is a performance of great skill, but the performer has made one error." Felix Harrow shifted. Vivienne watched with narrowed eyes. Lady Honoria sat pale but composed. Sir Alister's jaw was set. Poirot continued, pacing slowly. "First, Mr. Harrow, you confessed to waiting in the blue room before it was sealed. That is true. Your cigarette end was there, but you left before the murder. But the ash in the tray was disturbed only once after you by someone who wished to echo your presence." Harrow let out a shaky breath. "Second, the linen cupboard key. Dr. Larkin gave it to Martha at Lady Honoria's request, so we are told. But the key was removed from the ring earlier than that. The butler remembers unlocking the cupboard at 11. After that, it should have returned to the ring. It did not. It was taken by someone who knew it would open the stair, and who needed access without being seen." Pritchard nodded reluctantly. He had verified the timeline. "Third, the ampule of chloroform. It was taken from the doctor's dispensary while he was occupied at 2 in the morning. The same hour Lady Honoria was conveniently seen in the corridor, creating noise, establishing her wakefulness. But the true purpose of that disturbance was to give cover to another's movement. Lady Honoria's fingers tightened, but she did not speak. Poirot stopped at the head of the table. Now we consider motive. Mr. Darnley came for these papers. He touched the trust document lightly. He believed himself entitled. He threatened exposure. But he also enjoyed manipulation. He told Mr. Harrow to witness the room. He pressed Lady Honoria.
He placed himself where drama would bloom. Vivienne's voice was quiet. So he arranged his own death? No, Poirot said gently. He arranged confrontation. But he underestimated someone who understood him too well. His gaze shifted past Harrow, past Larkin, until it rested on Sir Alistair Grange. The room seemed to contract. Sir Alistair gave a short laugh. This is absurd. Is it? Poirot's tone remained mild. You knew both passages since boyhood. Mrs. Phelps confirmed it.
You were alone in your study between 11 and midnight, conveniently unobserved. You had the strength to cut a throat cleanly, and you had most to lose. Sir Alistair's face darkened. Lose? The estate remains in the family. Does it? Poirot asked softly. If the trust were validated, if Darnley proved lineage, portions of the estate would pass to him. Your control would weaken, and more dangerously, the scandal of your father's past would become public. You are a man of pride, Sir Alistair. Her pride does not share easily. Lady Honoria stared at her brother. Alistair? He rose abruptly. You can't prove— I do not need to prove with bloodstains, Poirot said. I prove with behaviour. When the gardener was accused, you urged haste. When the cabinet was mentioned, you grew angry, not fearful. And this afternoon, when the cigarette burned in the morning room, you alone did not move to look, because you knew who had left it. Pritchard stepped forward. Explain that. Poirot inclined his head. Sir Alistair smokes neither white nor brown cigarettes, yet in the cellar the planted case bore Mr. Harrow's initials style, engraved in a plain hand. A clever imitation, too clever. It required knowledge of Harrow's habits, knowledge obtained at dinner, when Sir Alistair asked, with unusual interest, about Harrow's London clubs and preferences. Harrow's eyes widened. You did. Sir Alistair's composure fractured.
Oh, circumstantial nonsense. Poirot's voice sharpened for the first time. And the wire, you struck Simmons from behind because he knew your voice. He described a gentleman who spoke softly, always smiling. That is you, Sir Alistair, when you choose. A silence fell like a blade. Lady Honoria rose slowly. Alistair, tell me it is not true. For a moment, the proud mask held. Then something in him collapsed. He would have ruined us, Sir Alistair said hoarsely. All of us.
It father's name dragged through mud, our finances exposed. I confronted him in that room. He mocked me. He said he would wait until morning to claim everything. His hands clenched. He turned his back. I used the passage. I thought I could make it seem impossible. Inspector Pritchard moved swiftly, seizing him. Sir Alistair did not resist. Lady Honoria sank back into her chair, face ashen. Poirot spoke quietly as Pritchard fastened the cuffs. You see, Inspector, the sealed room was vanity. It was not meant to conceal, but to astonish. A simple quarrel would have pointed too directly, but a mystery, that would scatter suspicion among servants and guests alike. Sir Alistair looked at Poirot with bleak clarity. How did you know? Poirot met his gaze. because you were the only one who never feared the passages. You moved as though the house belonged to you entirely. Pritchard led him away. The room emptied slowly. Harrow avoided everyone's eyes. Doctor. De Larkin looked stricken. Vivienne lingered by the window, unreadable. At last only Poirot and I remained. Lady Honoria paused at the door. "Thank you," she said faintly. Poirot bowed. "Madame, truth is rarely kind, but it restores order." When she had gone, I exhaled. "You suspected him from the start?" "Not from the start," Poirot corrected. "But when fear moved through this house, he alone grew more certain. And the murderer often reveals himself not by panic, but by confidence." He adjusted a candlestick a fraction of an inch, satisfied. "And the sealed room?" I asked. Poirot smiled faintly. "There are no sealed rooms, Hastings, only sealed minds. When one opens them, everything becomes clear." The candles flickered softly as we left Graysleigh Court, and behind us the great house stood silent, its secrets at last brought into the light,